I think we should have an open relationship.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Let's definitely do that.
With our cars.
Oh, flex car. Yeah, that's what I meant too.
FlexCar is the first and only month-to-month car lease. Swing from a Wrangler 1 month to a Prius the next. FlexCar. You drive everything.
Hi, I'm Renee Scherzer, and welcome to the Lightwork Podcast, a place for conversations about leadership, faith, health, relationships, and financial stewardship. One thing I've learned after nearly 3 decades of sitting across the table from thousands of individuals talking about money is that money can be a touchy subject, especially for couples. It can represent security, freedom, control, fear, generosity, and identity. So today's guest is someone that we've heard from before, because our last conversation, though, generated so many questions and more interest about one of the areas we covered. We are having a full episode about marriage and money. It doesn't have to be marriage. It could be even just a significant other. So welcome, Kim. Welcome back. And Kim is an advisor from CSP Financial here in Scottsdale. So today we are talking about conversations couples should have, although some may avoid, why money creates so much tension in relationships, and how couples can build financial trust instead of financial stress. So whether you've been married 6 months or 40 years, dating, engaged, divorced, or simply want a healthier relationship with money, this conversation is for you. So welcome back.
Thank you. Whenever you said love and marriage, actually, or money and marriage, I thought of the show, like the Love and Marriage.
The
Al Bundy.
Yes.
I know Love.
Everyone who's listening is like, oh, we know that show.
I'm thinking money and marriage.
I never remember anything. So welcome, Kim. This is very exciting. After all the years I've talked about, when I would do education sessions for my clients, marriage and money was always one that came to the top. And you work with so many couples that I thought that you would be the perfect person to come back and talk about this. And where we left off a few weeks ago, was about our money story. And I think we even posed that question to listeners. But why is someone's money story, why is that important to somebody? And what does it even mean?
Sure. Well, the money story it's not, recall in the last conversation, I mentioned that it's not just a story to people. I mean, we relate to it as the truth. That's just how it is. Yeah. And through the lens of how they see money, how you do anything is how you'll do everything in a lot of cases. So you don't just apply that story to money, you apply it to life. Like if you grew up in a household with scarcity as the predominant context, you're going to see scarcity throughout your life, or you can choose opposite if you're willing to, if you can recognize it, right?
That's what I do.
So exactly. So the story it's almost like, okay, well, that's what I saw growing up, and that's what I decided about money, and then I'm going to approach my life from that way. If we can identify it, then we can change it and we can transform it. It doesn't have to be your forever.
Yes. So what can someone ask themselves to say, okay, in my household, money was never talked about. So I'm not even sure where my money story came from. Yeah. Are there any questions that maybe someone could ask themselves to help kind of identify what is their money story? And maybe that'll also help them not only understand it themselves, but help where they can explain it to their spouse or significant other.
100%. I think the work starts starts with you first. So if you can do the work yourself, then you can see what you're bringing into the relationship. So the questions you can start to ask yourself are, what is my earliest memory of money? And that can be a whole other conversation, right?
Question.
Right? Because there are so many different events that could have happened, right? But maybe your earliest memory is usually the one that sticks with you the most. When I think about money, how do I feel about it? Do you feel scared? Do you feel excited? Do you feel guilt? Is there shame there? And money can often be associated with guilt and shame because it's a vehicle, right? So remember that our story comes up from our parents. Our parents took that from somewhere also. So it may not even be their fault. It's not a fault thing. They just took it from somewhere else.
Generationally,
right? So what did they say about money that I inherited?
Yeah.
I chose to believe that, and I can choose to change that too.
Yes.
Right. So, and what did they actually do? Often parents are, they say, don't do as I say, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Because they know inherently, they're like, I know I don't have the best habits, but I don't know how to change it.
Yes.
And that's not their fault either. We just took that on because that's what we saw, right?
Yes.
And a big one is, what am I afraid would happen if I actually looked at my money and looked at my finances?
Yes.
It's like gut in the feel. It's the pit in the bottom of your stomach that you're like, I don't want to confront it.
Yes. It's like going to the dentist. I always say people are like, I don't want to go to the dentist because I don't know.
Can we get laughing gas?
Yeah,
like every time we deal with money.
Well, it's interesting. I have a new dear friend and consultant that was getting her way of success because of what she believed money represented, and she's I've encouraged her to write about it, to take the moments to do self-reflection about identifying that she's enough. But she's gotten her own way of making money because of what her money story is. So, and I think that people don't forget that part. So of what money represents. So it's really taking it to the root. It's almost like a uncovering and unlayering.
That can be a lifetime process too,
yes.
right? I mean, it takes years.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like for many of us, I mean, in my 20s, it was very much confronting, like you can say that it was already there. It was like a conversation that just welcomed me into its arms, like in my 20s. It didn't feel so welcoming, but it felt like I was dealing with all these problems. There's so much I didn't know. And then, of course, all the behavior stuff that was inherent because I learned it growing up.
Exactly.
But then,
and they don't teach this in school. They don't teach, which I've spoken at all my kids' schools, and I love from the little ones that they're like, they've got the 3 cans, spend, save, and give. And, they have all these little tools. And then when you get a little older, we're talking about, looking at colleges and how to budget for that. So you work with a lot of couples, and today is about marriage and money. For couples, do you find opposites attract?
In a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah.
Well, because, let's look at savers and spenders. So if you're a saver, you're a saver, and you find that it's also very intriguing. The other side, the grass is on the other side, always greener.
Yeah.
And often you find a lot of balance with savers and spenders, right? And so they tend to find each other.
Yeah.
I think it's more rare, though, to have like the same, like savers and savers. It's like almost like, you're too much like me. So
And they're probably not going to create many memories together because they're both not want to spend $1.
Yeah. And then in my case with Joe, like we were both spenders.
Yeah.
And it, as an advisor now, it's, we've ultimately had to become like, I'd had to balance. So I've transformed a little bit where I've now become more of a saver and to be able to balance it out.
Yeah.
Just because, it doesn't really work when you're an advisor and you're telling people to save and you're not saving yourself. Like that doesn't
work. It's like the realtor doesn't own a house.
No.
Yes. And I know my first husband, who's still, who's a dear friend that, we lost in 2020. And he was a spender, and it made me become more of a saver, but then become resentful of it. So that was a huge conflict that we had. And with my fantastic husband now of 22 years, he was kind of a hybrid. He was like, he was mid-30s. He's like, I save, but I'm also spending. And so we had some interesting conversations about this. And thankfully, me being in this field and he had respect for me, he was willing to be coached a little bit. And so, but I was very thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really great that you brought up that you guys talked to each other.
Yes.
I think that because he was willing to take your coaching, I think in relationships where, of course, not one person is a financial advisor, right? So you're not in that kind of situation where you have a built-in coach.
Yeah.
It definitely makes a big difference to have someone else aside to be able to have a non-biased view, to be able to just, hey, take the emotions out.
Yes.
And there are, I think it leads us to the next question.
Well, I wanted to say too, because you also, as a coach before you were an advisor, you were coaching advisors. So that skill set I think is remarkable because I think we need a coach in pretty much every aspect of our life. But the first thing you ask couples is, and this actually statement may scare some people listening, is you asked for 3 months of financials. Now, that to some people is like, no problem. We've got this. Whereas others, I think maybe feel uneasy. What do you tend to find when you ask that? What is the reaction that you experience? And what do you find are maybe the biggest challenges of that exercise? And maybe I haven't asked you this before, but do people show back up for that second meeting once you what's the percent of people actually do that and show back up for that second meeting?
I find that the more they're willing to talk through it. Like especially if you have an emotional response to that question, like 3 months is pretty easy to get it's easy to push a couple buttons and download a couple docs, right?
Yeah.
But the emotional hurdle you have to overcome is what does it mean about me? What's this person going to think about me? Yeah. And is there guilt and shame? That usually what comes up, and along with fear. It's never just one or the other, right?
Yeah.
And the couple to your question, most of them do.
Oh, that's
I would say 80 to 90%.
Okay.
So there is a margin of people that really just don't want to confront it because for whatever reason, right? It could be they
to each
don't
other.
feel like they have enough and they don't want to talk about it. Or and to each other. And more often than not, I think with couples, I'm always going to get the documents when I'm talking to couples. So when it's single people who I know they just want some sort of advice, but they kind of want to figure it out themselves. And they really, that's when I usually don't, that's where I sometimes don't.
Well, I always tell people too, working for 30 years and mostly in the corporate retirement space, especially with 401k plans, is I'll put 3% in. Well, the company's matching up to 6%. And they're like, well, I'll bump it up next year. It's like, that's not going to happen. It's 5 years down the road. Well, they're showing back up and they're saying, oh, I should have maxed out.
Yeah. And are they a saver or are they a spender? If they're a spender and they're like, I need this money and I have these expenses coming up. And the best way for a spender then to really interrupt that habit is to automate. I mean, automation, you don't think about it. You don't spend what you don't see.
Exactly.
So,
and that's what 401k plans are, where it comes directly out of a paycheck. And so we can go down that whole road. I mean, I just love that space because it provides opportunities for people to actually build wealth. But coming across as we're talking about couples, that's, you wouldn't usually do that in the corporate setting. And in your environment, you get to sit down with couples. Now, I do have some couples that I've fantastically worked with that are amazing of how they respect one another, how they look to the other to be able to ask questions. There's no judgment. So I've seen it really successfully done where a lot of wealth is created because of that. But a lot of times when I'm asking questions, I've identified there's a money manager, like a one manager family where one person's doing the finances. Now, do you come across that often? And how do you see if there is someone, that is in that situation where either they are the person or their spouse is that person that just handles all their finances? Can you explain what those situations look like and how people can maybe see themselves and where they can be successful in that situation?
Sure. Well, in those couples, in those scenarios where there's one person who's managing, what I found has worked is they're in communication with each other. At the very least, let's say one person makes the money and then the other person manages the bills, right? Does the household, manages everything there. And, and then this person who's earning is like, I want to go and spend this. Yeah. But this person over here the other person is managing the budget. Now, where I found it's really worked is they can say, you know what, we've stretched and we've got to our limit for this month. Can we hold off until next month? Yeah. And we'll make that big purchase then.
Yeah.
But so then they're in communication, they're talking through it. And I think that really works for a lot of couples. Yeah. But I think at the ultimately, they're in communication, and that is a big key. They don't hold secrets from each other. Yeah. Hiding is really going to be where couples get in trouble, is when one person is hiding money or they hide debt. Or they hide things that they're ashamed of, and they just don't talk about it.
Yep. The stat I shared last time was 40% of families have financial infidelity, where they're hiding something financially from their their significant other.
Yeah. And that is like, money can be a hard thing to talk about, and it's easy for us, right? Because we're just that's the water we swim in. But for a lot of people, money is like such a taboo topic.
Yes.
So that they're even listening to this is almost like we get there's an opening here, and And those, I find that if things are kept in obscurity, if things are kept in the dark, that's where distrust is formed. You have it, and if you can just say, okay, this doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean I'm not enough. It doesn't mean that I'm not smart enough. It doesn't mean anything. It's just numbers on a piece of paper.
Exactly.
Take that aside for the moment. Even if you let the emotions roll back in later, just put it aside for a moment and then just look at the papers and look at the numbers, share, write it all down. If you feel overwhelmed, write it down for yourself first. And then just say, okay, how am I going to talk to my husband about this or my wife about this?
Well, and even there's so much information out there now for someone who does not know anything about finances, or they indicate they probably know more than they think they do. There's so many great little quick things. How to do a budget. What should I be saving? There's so many little tools if they're not at that point yet, or they're not sure, if they have that, they're not the money manager of the family. I think it's important to just get educated and make it a priority. I think that is so important. Now, one of the things, we're a family of athletes that are very competitive. So the thing that what my husband and I became were teammates, and we do work as a team. So when we first started, coming into how we were going to work together as money, we found when we really kind of tag team. Now, I may have had the experience, but he was also willing to learn and have those conversations. And so I know as a coach, you help people get to that point. Now, can you share with couples that maybe are kind of fledgling along, they're trying to decide, like, how do we work better together? Like, what advice would you give? Like, what would be that first step you would say?
Is to write it down first, and
write down what?
Like, write down all of the concerns. I would just brain dump your concerns about it, and then of course
where you are financially,
looking out financially, and talk to each other, like, have dates that are no big deal.
In a no judgment zone.
No judgment. And I have this, there's the rules of engagement, no blaming, no shaming, and no gaming. You don't
blaming, shaming, gaming.
No blaming, no shaming, no gaming. And that means really ultimately, like, don't compete against each other when it comes to the money. I think that, and if you're competitive,
you're competitive,
but for fun, right? You can be competitive for fun, making a game out of it. But if it comes down to, okay, I'm going to be better than you, and I'm going to judge you, and be, and I'm going to be in a position of dominance and control. That's where it gets a little.
Well, and that's where I see it. And usually from, more of that narcissistic personality. Like, I've got this, my spouse isn't smart enough to understand this. I do see that, and I've seen that before. There are clearly probably other challenges in those situations of communication, but for, even for that someone who does feel like they've got it, maybe, and I maybe shouldn't have said narcissistic, because it's also, sometimes I think I know it all and I'm a control freak. So, but for somebody who is like, I've got it, I understand finances, my spouse doesn't, what would be a way that person could say, you know what, I want my spouse to be engaged in this? What would be like a way they could approach that?
Yeah, it comes back down to the story, right? If you ask the person who's not engaging so much, like, they're like, I just don't really want to know. Sometimes I've had clients telling me, like, I don't really want to know what's in the sausage. I don't know how it's made. I just want the sausage. And that's okay. As long as you guys are on the same page with, budgetary, your long-term vision, like, what
goal setting
do you have? What are your ultimate what's your ultimate purpose? What is your vision together? 20, 30 years from now, where do you want to be? And if you look at the values and your cash flow and your money and your spending now, is that aligned with your values? Oftentimes it's not. I find, I'll talk to people and they'll say, I really value this as for myself. And then, but when you look at their money, it's not. It's like I
always say you learn a lot about somebody through looking at how they spend money.
Yeah, because I value time with my family and a lot of time and stuff. But then they spend it more on physical things or material things, and I think that's okay as long as you can be clear and And I think this society and culture tells us that we have to, these are the good things to have value, and these are not the good things. But you value what you value, and who cares what anybody else thinks?
Well, it also, when you have those questions, I love that about where you're going. Because if there's no roadmap of where you're going, you could be rowing in opposite directions. Because one spouse may say, I want my kids to go through a private school, where the husband's like, public's fine. I went through public, and personally, I went through public. And I want to make sure we have money for college. Where that could be a pretty significant financial, differing of where the cash flow is going to be, where you're going to go. How could it impact your retirement savings over that time? So I think identifying, not just our money, we started up with Money Story, but also what are your goals? Like, what do you want to feel about money? Where, money is no longer maybe about fear. You want to get to a place where money feels safe. And what does that mean to you? And having those types of conversations more about the dreams, not maybe even that first meeting about the actual financials that could be intimidating. Maybe that first meeting could be, when I say money, what does it mean to you? And start just being curious and then learning about, what would be a dream that you have. And I think, for us, for Chris and I, we talk a lot on our walks. Not just walks. We walk to our 2 dogs.
Yeah. This is part of your money date, right?
These are some of our money dates, yes. And we talk all the time, but about things, and that's kind of our almost like our strategy meetings too. And but we started talking about where we were going. It wasn't just because we hit the goal sooner than we thought, because we did work to a team, but then we were like, well, what's that next step? And there were some things that I learned even after being, working as a team. So I think always having those curious questions are really important. I think, as you said too. Now, go ahead.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up the date, because I think for people, sometimes if you're uncomfortable with talking about money to begin with, how do you even make it a common conversation? How do you make it less significant than it has been? And Joe and I will, like, one of our dates, I mean, it's like not necessarily planned, but then we'll just talk about it because it's so like, for us at this point, it's natural. And we talk about it probably like at least once a week. And like what we're thinking.
Once you get in that rhythm, it's like, it's like a gym routine.
And whether you, we have this cribbage game on our like, kitchen nook, and then we sit down and we're just playing cribbage, and then we'll just talk about stuff.
That's actually a good approach. It's almost like with kids, where, if you're staring at someone and asking them, they get uncomfortable. And like with my son, I would do everything as we're driving and we're both staring forward. He would be open to me about things. So it's almost like that's how you might need to start with your spouse too. So it's like a game.
Or even over a beer. I mean, we'll just sit and have a beer and then just exactly have a cocktail and just talk. And naturally, because for us, it's behind the scenes, we've already decided and agreed on that we're in this together. We actually have this sign above our bed, and it was sitting above our bed until we moved, but it was a sign that says, and together they built a life they loved. I got it from Etsy if you are looking for anything inspirational.
I have to look at the sign because I didn't take a picture, but I think we have a similar sign above our bed.
That's awesome. Well, now it's in our kitchen.
It's above I see it every day. I don't even remember. It's like the one, the movie or the TV show we can't remember.
Exactly.
So I'm curious. Now, one thing we would see, and we see now in companies, is they have 5 generations working together under the same company. So we also then have, the extremes. People are working longer, and they're starting earlier. So when you look at that and you think generational, from a financial standpoint, I know there's always challenges of, for the younger generation, they don't want to walk into a bank. They do everything on their Cash App. Whereas the older generation, the boomers, they want to walk into the bank. They want to have paper copies. So when you see people, then obviously us in between, we're kind of, hybrids. But what do you see across the generations that you sit down with as far as how couples relate, maybe any tips that you have or experiences that you'd like to share?
I love this generational question because people are approaching it differently as we've become more open about talking about things like this. So younger couples I found are willing to talk about it, and they're actually very engaged. They talk about everything to each other, and they'll do everything in front of each other.
Yes, we talked about that the other day. I was saying they toot in front of each other.
Yeah, they're way more comfortable. The taboo stuff, and is not as taboo as it is now, right? So the older couples I found are the ones who are more uncomfortable, where one person takes the traditional route of, I'll be on the sideline watching. And even culturally, like I found Asian women, although Americanized Asian women is different, because I would say I'm more Americanized, whereas traditional, I'm Vietnamese, and my mom actually was the primary breadwinner. But my dad never, ever, ever talked about money. Right. Nobody talked about money. It was just like, we're just going to work, and we're just going to, and then
happen behind the scenes.
So much shame behind the scenes, right? Yeah. So for the older generation, and it's really interesting. My dad was, he would have been 83. And so I have older parents. I'm 41. So I like to say I'm a hybrid, because I'm I'm a elder millennial.
Yeah.
But I also have is it baby boomer? Is that the age?
Gen X is
my parents.
Oh, no, your parents are baby boomers.
Yeah. So I was brought up the same way that Gen X was raised. We had the traditional punishment, all that stuff. So my family was very, very direct, but money was still not a topic you ever talked about.
Yeah. Well, we had talked before about the mine, ours, and theirs. Mm-hmm. So, for us, we were, Chris and I, as we were talking about it, and we both have our own accounts and we have joint accounts. But we share everyone has all the IDs. We write everything out. We have a little paper hidden in our house that shows even we've tracked our success over the years. Yeah. It literally is just a paper tucked in a money book, and so I shouldn't say that on this podcast.
It's hiding underneath their pillow.
It's hiding. But for people who deal with that, I think, the transparency is the most important thing, I would say. And along those lines, I think, because we've talked about that, is, of course, I think we all know, is hiding anything doesn't make sense. But there's no where people say, we should all have one account. There's no right way. I think we talked about as well as before. But where do you for those strongest marriages that, let's say they kick off, everything's transparent. What is the frequency you think they should really sit down? And how often do you sit down when you have a couple? What do you recommend to them, or what do you recommend the DIY?
I think it varies.
DIY people.
It varies depending on the couple, right? If they're if they'd rather just not talk about it, have a third person there, have a meeting with your advisor once a month if you absolutely have to, right? Yeah. You can request anything from your advisor. For couples, as far as frequency, I mentioned that Joe and I talk about just spontaneously. We'll bring it up as it happens. As whether, once we get paid, and then what do we want to do with this? He talks about his company, I talk about my business, and it's just an ongoing conversation for us. And I found that that's really worked, because the more often you can talk about something, the easier it is, as long as you're aligned.
It doesn't have that sting attached.
Totally. I think that's part of it is,
and I think that's
frequency.
The frequency,
removes the significance and heaviness.
Yeah.
And here's also, when it comes to strategy, I for couples, there's you can have joint accounts. But I also found that, if you use credit cards, and I don't advise using credit cards, if you can't pay it off every month. However, as a couple, you can use it to keep budget. You can have a credit card just for groceries.
Amex has the whole report they have at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. So if you guys can align on, okay, well, this card is just used for groceries. This part is just used for gas. Yeah. This card is used for our non-monthly things like vacations or something like that. But then you can keep to the budget, because if on your grocery card you're going over on you hit the budget. There's a real budget there, so it keeps it the discipline pretty intact.
Well, you reminded me of a funny story. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. There were some moms that would buy these clothes, and it was not a grocery store, but the receipt would have grocery, and they were able to somehow finagle it where it looked like the money was for groceries, and the husbands thought they were just spending a lot of money at the grocery store, and it was actually a clothing store. Uh-huh. So there has to be trust there. that. But that just made me think of that. And I thought, oh my goodness gracious, that is layer upon layer of challenges. So I deviate. But so couples having different goals. That is something that, what do you find? Because I have to think when people sit with you, not everyone's like, we're both rowing the same direction. We're both exactly, when we think 10 years down the road, our bullseye is exactly the same. What do you find? Do you find, what do you find happens with goals and alignment?
Well, I don't find as many couples who are totally different in alignment, right? Like in terms of long vision, like their vision is, they ultimately want the same experience, like feelings they want. And the how may be a little different for each person. So then maybe they want security and freedom, and that looks different for a lot of different for everybody, right? So I had a couple the other day who one person is a business owner and they're the visionary and they're the earner, whereas the other person needs security. And so for them, that person who needs security really wants to have, like, insurance is really important, like having a term or a life or a permanent policy. For her, it was very, very important to have that baseline. For him, it was like, you know what, if I don't have that, it's not a big deal. I can just work.
Okay, that gives me anxiety.
I know.
I think anyone listening, I think I said this a little bit on the last one too, was if anyone would be at a disadvantage if your income was no longer there, you need life insurance.
Totally.
There's some, if you're healthy, you can get some very cheap term policies, or you can use it as strategy for long-term planning. So,
well, in their case is of course he's listening and he really would acknowledge it, but I think this is the first time that they've expressed that kind of concern where now we can actually fulfill on that need.
Yes.
Whereas before it was just relying on the business and having cash flow coming from the business. So
this just comes down to conversations.
Totally. I mean, you just talk about it. And if you can't talk about it to each other, then bring in a third person.
Well, I keep saying, I think your coaching is fantastic and how your approach is so accepting, and what gives people a comfort of talking about it, because it is uncomfortable. And so now we're shifting gears a little bit. What do you feel parents are unintentionally teaching their kids? And you probably see it with clients as well, of when they're talking to you, if they're parents, you're probably seeing what their kids are learning.
Oh, totally. Well, those are my favorite clients to work with. It's multiple generations.
Yeah.
So there's a client where I have 3 generations. So it's grandparents and then their child and then the
little ones.
They're millennial. Well, it's millennial. I think they're more Gen Z. Okay. But I can see the habits, but the nice thing is though they are very open as a family. So they've developed that habit of being able to talk about anything. Whereas the habits that often it's the habits that they see and that you're not aware of that they pick up. So, if you come home and if you find that you're just not talking about it, not making, just not talking about it to them, I think they're going to make up their own meaning about their own money, right? So for me growing up, because we didn't talk about it, so I was like, any money I had, I was like, I guess it's money for me to spend. But the funny thing is, my parents were like always stressing, you have to save, you have to save, you have to save. And that was where it was coming from. It was their scarcity. They came from war times. And they didn't trust the bank. They didn't trust investment. That's when they didn't know. They still don't trust.
Yes.
They would rather keep cash, right? So, but
that's where you can.
Now I learned. I know differently.
Things. Yeah,
exactly. And that's investing in yourself and learning is there's the emotional part in what you learned.
Yeah.
For parents who, at the end of the day, I think the one advice that I would say for parents is just to talk about it.
Yeah. And
it's okay for kids. It's not a burden for them to learn where the money is going. Maybe have their own habit. As far as like kids getting paid for their chores. I didn't get paid for doing chores. I was just expected to clean the house and make my bed. And for me, that's a different conversation altogether. Right. But I think that giving them a habit of having some money though to start, or maybe allowing them to earn it in some way does give them a start of how do I relate to this money? What do I do with it? I mean,
I knew a fantastic mortgage broker that gave her son a budget. And it also included his haircuts and gel. And he was a very, always looked nice, and birthday gifts. So when he would get invited to, all these birthday parties, and, she would be like, you got to decide, because it was started to be, he learned, and he was very particular about his hair, and they would have date night, and she would say, you didn't wear gel. And he's like, well, I'm trying to make it last longer, because he was started learning. But that was a great way for budgeting. I thought that was really fantastic. Now, we talked about mistakes in our 20s that kind of people make that echoes for decades. What I saw most often was college debt, people going to schools that they couldn't afford, getting degrees that were not going to produce an actual career path that could pay that off. I know I had a credit card within 3 minutes of walking on ASU's campus in the business college.
Same.
I got that under control earlier because I was a finance, but that was my degree. What would you say is one thing that you're seeing now of 20s, the people that are in their that did something in their 20s that are kind of echoing? So maybe we can help protect people or help maybe people feel like understood.
Yeah. Well, when you're young, it's like you have time on your side to invest, right? To like compound and grow. I can't stress that enough. Debt is, well, especially high interest debt, which is credit cards. They can bury you. So debt can be a tool that you use to build on or bury you. And unfortunately, with credit cards, it's not. If you can relate to it, like it's not your money, it's somebody else's money, and you got to pay them what you spent plus extra. And that's the easiest way for it for you to get into a pit. Yeah. But certainly, it starts with the habits. And if that's where you are now, the habits that you build and even start, I would say automate and automatically pay some of those and not put new ones on.
Yes. It's also like the Dave Ramsey has a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
I feel like that's my biggest success, because after my divorce, I inherited debt. And that terrified me because I wasn't someone who ever spent money. But I think it's my biggest success. I still have my spreadsheet in my office that I wrote victory across every line. But
I love that you gamify it. Like
I gamify everything. It was like a game. I wanted to get past there were 7 of them. 7, yes. So I was very thankful. I'm glad I was made the way I was. So we're going to shift into rapid fire as we're starting to wind this down. So I just want 1 sentence answers. Okay. There's 5 questions. The best investment people can make outside the stock market.
yourself.
Love that. Biggest financial myth.
You have to have a lot of money to start.
Totally. One habit that creates wealth.
Automation.
Yes, agree. One thing couples should stop doing immediately.
Keeping secrets.
Yes, that's a good one. One thing every okay, I scribbled here. What is one thing everyone should start doing this week?
Schedule a money date.
Love that. So, I love
Did I get my points?
Those are really
Yeah,
good.
the points?
You got ding. Yeah, I would say you got 100% on this. So, okay, closing. Kim, you're sitting now with a couple celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Now they've weathered job changes, children, market downturns, unexpected health expenses, and just surprises. What do you think they would tell their younger selves about money?
Take the trips. I mean, they would take the trips so you can make the memories, because what's it all for? Because when you look back, are you going to remember for couples that have a hard time
Yes.
spending, but remember, everything is going to be together. And if you have arguments about money, if you can go through it together, that's what they're going to remember. We went through this hurdle together, and this is the tough time. But it's the building it together is the part that is going to ultimately last.
I think, yes, if I was with that couple, it was just, looking back at the success that they were able to retire and enjoy those vacations. And they made financial, being a team and financially a priority. So, yeah, I love that. So for couples, I have a challenge. And even if it's just a single person listening, schedule one conversation with your significant other this week. And it's not about budget, another bad word. I always say budget. I always say monthly allocation. I used to say, not about bills, but just talk about your dreams and goals. Maybe even just ask your spouse, what kind of life are we building together? And just start there, dream together. I think that is so wonderful. And, as we close, financial freedom isn't just wealth accumulation, but it's about how your money aligns with your values, your purpose, and the life that you're creating together. And so make this a priority. And, for those who are listening, if you found this useful, please share this podcast with your friends. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I would love a 5-star rating as well. And Kim, where can they find you? I know I'll put her email in the description of the podcast. Where else could they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website, cspfinancialgroup.com.
Wonderful. And to everyone out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this discussion, and just go out there and spread your light. Thank you.
Summer's a gift. The gift of days that last a little longer. A brighter state of mind. So gift yourself a new Kia at the Kia Summer Sticker Sales Event. With specially tagged vehicles including the Sorrento, Sportage, Carnival, as well as the Niro Hybrid. All backed by a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty. So the gift of summer can keep on giving for summers to come. Kia, movement that inspires.
Call 800-333-4KIA for details. Always drive safely. Event ends 7/6/26. See dealer for warranty details.